In 1921, a handful of rich New Jersey golfers had a problem. Their town wouldn't let them play on Sundays. So they did what New Jerseyans had been doing for a generation. They got the state to carve them their own town. Tavistock, 3 houses, 9 people, 95% fairway. A newspaper called it a town for men whose inalienable rights included the pursuit of the elusive golf ball. They didn't change the law. They seceded from it. And in New Jersey at the time, that was barely even strange. New Jersey had the easiest exit in America. An 1878 law let any corner of a town break away by petition and a simple vote. For 16 years, almost no one used it. Then, in 1894, somebody pulled the trigger. A new school law merged each township's little schools into one budget, one tax, and one shared debt. But it exempted brand new boroughs, so you could break away, keep your own school, and leave the debt to your neighbors. The papers named it like an outbreak, Boroughitis, a fever that ended by amputating a piece of its own town. In Bergen, one town bolted over a road tax. They claimed they paid $2,400 for $600 of road work. However, it botched its first election so badly the Supreme Court threw the whole thing out. The ballots had been collected in a hat. Go figure. Of the 564 towns New Jersey has today, 40 were born in these 2 years, before the state slammed the door in 1896. So here's the question for the rest of this. What did people actually build with a machine that easy to spin up? The first answer? Vanity. Florence Vanderbilt Twombly held one of the great fortunes in America. And in 1899, she built her own town, Florham Park, to save, as the story goes, about $200. Then she threw the new borough a 4th of July party, 600 guests, $2,000 of fireworks. She didn't even win a vote. She had the legislature pass a law, democracy for thee, a private statute for me. Then there's Teterboro, where in 1917 a Manhattan banker bet a swamp on the horses and named it after himself. The racetrack never ran, not one horse, but an airport landed on his drained swamp instead, conveniently across the river from Manhattan. Which is a gold mine of tax dollars, by the way, all sitting under barely 60 residents. The neighbors keep trying to grab it. So far, no luck. Down the shore, Ocean Township once ran the whole coastline until its neighbors ate it alive. 8 towns peeling off the beach, one by one. The last bite came in 1957. A gilded little enclave called Lock Arbor seceded purely to stop a developer's beachfront motel. And it walked off with the last of the coast, leaving, in the Times words, the now ironically named Ocean Township. Fitting. Then, the strangest of all, Pine Valley, the top-ranked golf course in America, was, for 93 years, legally its own town. The club owned every home. You couldn't live there unless you were a member. It only dissolved the town in 2022 after it let women in. Shrewsbury began as 1,000 square miles. Today, a tenth of one, 10,000 times smaller. But not everyone broke away to dodge a bill. Peapack Gladstone broke away to pay a bigger one. It sat at the end of the Millionaire's Express and left, by most accounts, for streetlights and telephones. Which begs the question, if a golf game could buy you a whole town, what could you build if you were serious? For starters, in 1941, the government built war worker housing between Clark and Linden on federal land that paid neither town a cent in tax. Neither town wanted the burden without land to tax, so the state made them their own town over the governor's veto. Then the town born of pure spite flipped the script. In 1950, the people bought it from Washington for $1.3 million. They still run it as a co-op today. No deeds, no landlords. You hold a right to live there and sell back at cost. The state built Winfield to get rid of its own people. The people had plans of their own. Now go back to Tavistock, the golf town. It was carved out of a place called Center Township. A few miles off sat Freehaven, a settlement of free and formerly enslaved families, going back to the 1840s. In 1926, that same law incorporated Lawnside, the only self-governing black town in New Jersey, under Jim Crow. Same township, same decade, one drawn for a golf Sunday, the other so a whole people could finally govern themselves. In fact, making Lawnside was the last thing Center Township ever did. Creating it dissolved the old township for good. Then, in 1936, the depths of the Depression, the New Deal tried something radical. It built an entire town from scratch. It was for Jewish garment workers fleeing New York's sweatshops, offering something new, your own home and a stake in your own work. The whole town was one cooperative, its own factory, its own farm, its own store. At the ribbon cutting, Albert Einstein held the hat while immigrant children drew slips, deciding which family got which house. The painter Ben Shahn moved in and put the whole story on the school wall, the crossing, the sweatshop, the dream. The cooperative went broke within a few years, but the town survived, renamed itself Roosevelt, and it's still there. A few even had the same power and refused it. Free Acres, founded 1910, holds all its land in common, so no one person ever can. "90 years after the fever, a dying former Speaker of the Assembly sat down and wrote its autopsy. He called New Jersey's map a web woven by a spider on LSD and blamed the duplication for the nation's highest property taxes. His fix was simple, but doomed. Merge the towns into bigger ones. Fewer governments, fewer bills. New Jersey didn't listen. A century after the fever, it still runs on 564 separate towns. We still pay the nation's biggest property taxes, but that same power built a town for a golf game and one where the formerly enslaved finally governed themselves. But the machine runs backwards, too. By 1997, Pahaquarry's last two voters met in a schoolhouse and voted 2-0 to erase their town. You can tell a lot about a place by what it builds when you make it that easy to build.